You're watching Afridom TV channel, Our Time. I'm Oleg Borisov in the studio. Glad to welcome you. Let's get started. The Russian army continues to attack Ukrainian towns and villages. Last night, Zaporizhzhia and the surrounding region came under fire again. As a result of the attack, one person was killed and 7 others were injured. One of the drones hit a private residential house. A fire broke out. This was reported by the head of the regional military administration, Ivan Fedorov. The attacks on Odessa also haven't stopped. The Russian Federation's army launched drones at the city and the region. Railway infrastructure facilities were damaged. During the attack, a fuel tank caught fire, and in one of Odessa's districts, windows were damaged by the blast wave, and residential buildings and educational institutions. There were also disruptions in the water supply. And in the Dnipro region, 4 people were injured as a result of Russian attacks. Among them is a 13-year-old girl. This was reported by the head of the regional military administration, Zaporizhzhia. Russian troops attacked the region more than 10 times with artillery, drones, and glide bombs. There are also injured people in the Donetsk region. In the Slavyansk community, a woman and her 15-year-old son were wounded. According to local authorities, Russian occupiers launched 2 drones in the region of the Duran type. In total, over the past night, Russian occupiers launched 83 drones at Ukraine, 50 of which were Shaheds. Air defense forces managed to neutralize 55 drones. And just this week, the Russian army has launched 1,300 attack drones, more than 1,200 guided aerial bombs, and 50 missiles at Ukraine. The main target of these strikes is the energy sector. This was reported by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He emphasized that the Russians are deliberately combining their strikes in such a way as to destroy our power generation. That is why Ukraine is counting on immediate support from its partners.
There can be no pauses when it comes to protecting lives. In Munich, we reached agreements with the leaders of the Berlin format on specific packages of energy and military aid for Ukraine until February 24th. I am grateful to our partners for their willingness to help, and we expect that all deliveries will be prompt. Ukraine needs air defense every day to deprive Russia of its tools of terror. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine, on Telegram.
President Zelenskyy and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio discussed the situation at the front and Russian strikes on Ukraine's energy system the day before. They held bilateral talks on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. They also discussed protecting Ukrainian civilians from the cold after strikes by the Russian Federation. In addition, Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Marco Rubio discussed a new round of trilateral talks between Ukraine, the U.S., and the Russian Federation, which will take place on February 17th through 18th in Geneva. The head of state emphasized that it is important to achieve progress on security guarantees for Kyiv and the economic recovery of Ukraine. The United States is committed to negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. This was stated by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a meeting with the foreign ministers of the G7 countries. On the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, the heads of foreign affairs departments confirmed the importance of G7 cooperation efforts to counter global threats to international peace and security. Canada has announced a plan to support Ukraine. This was reported by Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand. She also confirmed Canada's readiness to join multilateral security guarantees as part of the coalition of the willing. Additionally, the minister emphasized Canada's commitment to increasing economic pressure on Russia and participating in the return of Ukrainian prisoners and deported Ukrainians. In addition, Canada has officially joined the SAFE program. On the sidelines of the Munich conference, a cooperation agreement was signed. European Commissioner for Defense and Space, Andrius Kubilius, and Canadian Defense Minister David McKnight.
The agreement strengthens our collective security, supports the development of key defense capabilities, and provides Canadian industry with access to European defense markets while contributing to European and Ukrainian security. Andrius Kubilius, the European Commissioner for Defense and Space on the IKS social network.
Japan will continue to deepen relations with NATO and provide assistance to Ukraine. This was agreed upon in Munich by Japan's Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Motegi stated that Japan intends to elevate its relationship with NATO to a new level by deepening cooperation in various areas, including defense equipment and industrial collaboration. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha discussed the 20th package of sanctions against Russia and Ukraine's membership in the European Union with the head of EU diplomacy, Kaja Kallas. They also discussed peace initiatives and ways to accelerate their implementation with the participation of the United States and the European Union.
In particular, the swift adoption of a strong 20th package, a ban on maritime transport for Russia's shadow fleet, and an entry ban for participants in Russia's aggression against Ukraine. I thanked Kaja for her personal efforts and dedication, as well as the EU for all its support, especially during this difficult winter. We coordinated our steps ahead of the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion and our upcoming contacts and events. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on the social network X.
From a modular town to a fully fledged house. In Lviv, temporary housing has been set up for internally displaced persons who require special care and accessible spaces. The house was renovated to meet inclusivity standards in cooperation with international partners. People who lost their homes as a result of Russian aggression are already living there. The stories of the residents. More in our report.
These chords are more than just music for Alexei Serhienko. It's a way for him to return to life after being wounded on the front line. The serviceman miraculously survived a mortar attack in the Kharkiv region. Shrapnel from the mine damaged his spinal cord. Now Alexei gets around in a wheelchair.
I was wounded in the village of Kondrashevka. We were just engaging the enemy when the explosion happened. It was a 120mm mortar shell. I survived by some miracle, because a lot of the guys died that day. At first I was conscious, but I lost consciousness during the evacuation. An ambulance from Kharkiv drove out to meet us in Kupiansk, and they were giving me blood transfusions right on the road. If that hadn't happened, they wouldn't have made it in time to save me.
Before the full-scale invasion, Alexei lived with his family in Nikopol, but after he was wounded in 2024, they moved to Lviv. At first, they lived in hospitals, since the treatment was long and intensive. Now the family was offered housing in a home for internally displaced persons, where everything is designed so that someone in a wheelchair can be as independent as possible.
It's convenient, just heat it up on the stove. It's really comfortable here. There's a ramp, even though we live on a hill. It's easy to use. The kitchen is accessible, the bathroom is accessible, everything is within reach. I could manage on my own without outside help. Of course, my mom helps, but what's important is that I can be independent. That means a lot to me.
This inclusive house, Katerina Mazentseva from Bakhmut also lives here. She has had cerebral palsy since childhood. Together with her sons and mother, she went through evacuation, living in a theological seminary, and 2 years in a modular town. She says they felt the difference in living conditions from the very first day.
Here, you feel like you're at home. Here, you really feel like you're at home. Yes, you no longer have your own home, but you're in a spacious room with brick walls that breathe. Here, there's fresh air, the forest is nearby, but a modular town is still just temporary housing. I lived there for 2 years, even though it's only meant for a few months at most. Plastic, no ventilation, lots of people. It's a completely different feeling.
The house has 17 living rooms, 3 kitchens, accessible showers, a laundry room, children's playrooms, and an elevator. Right now, 21 people live here. Among them are 5 children and 10 adults with disabilities. All of them are from cities that suffered the most as a result of Russian aggression.
These are people with special needs who have a hard time in standard conditions. It's more comfortable here than in temporary housing. Our goal is to help those who are struggling the most right now, because every person who lost their home because of the war deserves support.
Work on landscaping and installing accessibility features is still ongoing, but soon nearly 70 people could live here. Yulia Bill, Vadim Dmitriev from Live for Freedom TV channel.